last group, and we know everyone wants to get out of here, so we're going to make it very quick and interesting as we can. Yeah. Allow us to introduce ourselves. This is Nuri from South Korea, and I'm Youssef from Egypt. And our presentation is in a movie format, so we hope you enjoy it. Yeah. Is it? Yeah. No, no. Just use this.
There are no more barriers to cross. All I have in common with the uncontrollable and the insane, the vicious and the evil. All the mayhem I have caused and my utter indifference toward it, I have now surpassed. My pain is constant and sharp, and I do not hope for a better world for anyone. In fact, I want my pain to be inflicted on others. I want no one to escape. But even after admitting this, there is no catharsis. My punishment continues to elude me. I became no deeper knowledge of myself. No knowledge can be extracted from my telling. This confession has meant nothing.
So we start off by identifying the region where the Besos River lies and the surrounding territories. And on the right we have like a matrix of possible connections. And then this diagram you can see from the top left corner all the way to the bottom right corner how the transformation happened throughout time to this area where it started out with a continuous urban fabric, and then it ended up in shredded into smaller pieces. We concentrate on the urban development and how it tore apart the area, since the whole project is about bridging and reconnecting, so this was our approach. And we treat this site as a living organism that gets wounded and starts bleeding. So we identify the site first where you have the Besos River and Barcelona on the west bank and Badalona on the east bank. And we start looking, as I mentioned, on how to heal these wounds of the site. So we take our inspiration from the planaria worm, which is a very unique organism because it has the characteristics of cell regeneration. So basically, if you cut this worm into different pieces, it regrows in each different piece is an individual organism, and that's a characteristic found in all living cells. So we make the metaphor of having a human flesh wound and consider it our river. And our idea is to dig deeper into this process to see how we can heal the wounds. So first, in a very abstract form, we try to identify the areas of the wounds at the site. And then we'll start seeing different possibilities on how we can reconnect all these wounds. And then in the final stages, we're going to take a virtual tour around all these new connections that have been formed to try to see if we could have healed these wounds and created a new program for the whole site. And here we make the analogy between the different levels of the site and the different levels of the living organism. And there's a lot of similarity between them. And then we move into the analysis process. We start off with the cell first, and then we move on to the site. The cell regeneration process is a very unique one, but to understand it, we had to first understand all the different aspects. So basically, the definition is the recuperating and regenerating of lost physical parts. The purpose is to bring the animal back into a state of equilibrium. The object is the amputated parts. Location is where the wounds occur. Mediation is the DNA synthesis. So then we go on a microscopic level to see the cell itself, because this is where all the process occurs. So basically you have an outer protective shell, and then layers in the middle where all the action happens, and then you have the core, which is the energy source that fuels the whole process. And then we break down this process into 8 main stages, and these will be the parameters that we're going to be using until the end of the project. So first is the interphase, which is identifying the torn cell. Prophase is the beginning of the internal combustion. Prometaphase is where it starts finding neighbors, and then the attraction, and then the direction, occupying density, and then you have the protection layer at the very end that covers the whole process. And these are 8, you can call them motion pictures that we generated using digital software to replicate the 8 processes under microscope. And then we start seeing how we can apply this to the site. So we choose something similar to a living cell, and that's the box. And then you have the same 8 steps. So the second step is breaking down this cube into small cubicles. Step 3 is finding each 2 neighboring cubicles and connecting them together. Step 4 is the attraction points, which you will see later on the site. Direction is where this cell regeneration process happens. And then the 6th phase is the occupying of the new generated links, and then densifying these links. It's like finding programs and for these newly generated links. And then at the end you have the protection layer, which covers up the whole process. So basically what we did is replicate the process that happens to a living cell using just a very basic architectural unit. So here you can see clockwise the different processes from beginning to end. So you start with a box and you end up with an architecture cell. Then we start analyzing the site itself on a territorial scale. So first you identify the different topologies and programs found on the site, and we apply to it our proposal for reconnecting these isolated blocks. Then we start studying vegetation and green areas in plan and in section. Then we look at the blocks and how they're isolated, and we find a way to merge them together. And this map shows the circulation, vehicular and pedestrian, and this is our proposal for it. Then we try to think in a more 3-dimensional manner where we're going to overlap all these studies together and find what we can extract out of them. This is kind of an abstract motion picture that shows the different possibilities of what could be if we overlap these studies together. So the accumulation of studying these 5 things would then help us find the final proposal form. Later. Then we zoom in more into the specific area of intervention. We study the architecture and the different topologies, and then we look at the green spaces and the open spaces. And since it's on the coast, so it has a lot of open spaces by the beach. Then we look at the infrastructure, and again, because it's on the coast, so we have a lot of dead ends. And finally, we look at the ground figure and the blocks. And these circles are the attractor points. So when we overlay all these studies together, we start applying the 8 steps that we mentioned before. We start getting a better understanding of what the final proposal could be. And then we start reaching an actual physical form that would imitate what we have been studying. So very abstractly on plan, you start seeing the different programs that can be hosted in these newly generated forms. So we take away all the additions that we propose and we start breaking them down. So you can see we have 3 types of connections. First, you have the linear, which represent the infrastructure and the roads and bridges. The second one is the surface, which connects the open spaces and the green areas. And the third one is the volumetric connections, which host actual programs inside of it. So taking a tour inside these newly generated forms, you can start identifying the different kinds of connections that we came up with. And here in this first section, you can start seeing how the newly generated sections, volumes inside these sections, interact with the existing architecture and the inside volumes of them. And the rest is pretty self-explanatory. Thank you. you.